Hi everybody, this is Matt Hillen from the Illinois Department of Commerce. I will be your host again today. We're doing a series of informational sessions around the WIOA Youth Career Pathways RFA. We thank you very, very much for your time and your attendance at these webinars. For those of you who were not here last Wednesday, basically how it works is I'm going to do a little walkthrough of the goal of the RFA, hit a couple of key points of the application, and kind of talk about how the process is going to go. I'm going to do that a lot more quickly than I did last Wednesday. We did another one of these sessions last Wednesday. That session is recorded, and it is posted to the website that Chelsea is about to put in the text box, which is illinoisworknet.com/youth2016. You've likely already seen a million announcements about different pieces of information from me. Wanted to make sure that no one was lacking information going into this. It is really, it's a little bit outside the box for what we've done in the past for youth. I think it's really important, and we'll talk about why. But wanted to make sure that folks have all the information that they need, which is why I'm going to go over that information again today. I'm going to do it a little bit more high level and a little bit more quickly than I did last Wednesday, so that we can get directly into the frequently asked questions that we've received so far, that I've received by email or that we've received at the site. We've tried to post all of those. I do think that we're still missing one or two that we got recently, but we'll get everything posted on the site as soon as we possibly can. A lot of those I'm going to talk a little bit more about today, and maybe a little bit more less prescribed of language than we posted on the site, and allow time for us to talk a little bit more freely, to have a conversation and talk about what additional information folks might need to apply for a grant under the RFA. It's a really exciting opportunity. We have support from all the core WIOA partners in this. We are all contributing to the decision-making process. We've got funding from multiple streams. So we're really trying to live out the unified plan that is out there, and try to support the regional plans now that are in development. And that's really a big key piece of what this RFA is about, to try and support the things that folks are planning on doing in the regions. Do it with the key sectors and economic development and business partners in mind, and most importantly, make a big impact on youth and their current work situation and their careers for the future as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the PowerPoint here. I thank everyone for answering the questions. We'll throw a couple of those back up at the end to kind of reiterate, the information that we really need. I hope that everybody entered what organization they're from. We are trying to kind of track that so we can gauge, for our purposes, we can gauge, what kind of applications we think we might receive, so that we can plan to turn these around quickly. Okay, so as we get into the slides, again, I'm going to do these at a high level and a little bit more quickly than last week, so we can get into the FAQ. But I just want to talk about a few things. First, the project goal obviously is around the goals of WIOA. It's around system integration. And really the marrying of economic development, education, and workforce objectives. Funding will typically be 12 to 18 months. These applications are due May 2nd. We're on a tight timeline now. Applications received after the due date will be reviewed only if there are funds remaining after we award timely applications. Grant awards will generally not exceed $500,000. That's a soft cap. It would have to be a pretty big and elaborately described project for us to go over that, I think. Blending and braiding of funds is required. This is very important. We have to have co-investment of public and private funds. And it's really important that that is a key piece of your application. Projects do have the requirement to report leveraged resources as they, as they are described in the application, and describe exactly how those are broken out. We'll get into that a little bit more later. Chelsea, will you flip the slide? The guiding principles for this RFA and for what should drive your application were boiled down by the Illinois Workforce Investment Board's Youth Task Force. It's a task force that ran over the last approximately year and a half and had representation from a wide variety of stakeholders and state agencies. And what that task force talked about was best practices for career pathways, specifically as we move into the WIOA era under this new law. We did boil those down to kind of 10 major categories. Those are described in a heck of a lot more detail in the task force report. Highly suggest that as you're putting together your project plan and your application, that you're aware of that report and that you know kind of the detail that goes in behind it and what was intended in writing this RFA, because we did write it to the recommendations of the task force. Okay, that task force report, again, if you haven't seen yet, which would surprise me at this point, because I've kind of been trying to hit everybody over the head with it. But that task force is on the IllinoisWorkNet.com/Youth2016 website. Projects should be sector-based, and those sectors are readily accessible in more detail at the IllinoisPathways.com website. You can learn more about those sectors, but really what I want you to do is make sure that you're in touch with your local workforce area and talking about the strength of the sectors in their region. Those of you who are not familiar with your local workforce area, highly suggest that you reach out to them as soon as possible and talk to them about this, because they are looking at data right now in development of their regional plans that talks about the key sectors and the key business partners in their region. So you're going to know a lot more about the strength of your project ideas by talking to them. Eligible applicants. We are looking for a broad range of applicants, from local workforce areas to private sector employers to training providers to educational institutions and CBOs that may or may not have been involved with WIOA in the past, may have been involved with one of the core partners like Department of or Division of Rehabilitation Services at DHS or the Illinois Department of Employment Security or ICCB. We're welcoming all of those respondents. As far as participants go, we're looking for youth ages 16 to 24 that meet the requirements of WIOA. We have a little bit, you can take a look at what those requirements are, but basically they break down into in-school or out-of-school youth. Out-of-school youth must have an additional barrier. That barrier may be that they're from a high-need population, like student or youth that are involved in the juvenile justice system, foster youth, youth with disabilities, things like that. That's an emphasis piece. That's not a requirement. We do have an emphasis, though, also just generally on opportunity youth, which is kind of a term of art describing young people who are not in school and not in the labor force. Priority populations, again, we'll go over that in more detail here in a minute. I do want to just briefly talk about the WIOA spending requirement. The funds that we're using for this there is a requirement on WIOA funding that goes towards youth that requires that we spend 75% of those funds on out-of-school youth and a maximum of 25% on in-school youth. So it's not that we won't fund projects that are for in-school youth. It's just that if WIOA Title I funding is used, which is the overwhelming majority of the funding going into this. There are other streams, but the majority is going to be WIOA Title I funding. And 75% of that funding has to be spent on out-of-school youth. Priority populations you'll see listed here and also in the RFA. I'm not going to get into much detail on those, but we do want to see applications and will give special emphasis to the populations that show up that are high need or high barrier populations that show up in applications. Talk about program criteria. Again, you're going to see some similarities here. The guiding principles of the task force are what we used as program criteria, and these criteria are boiled down into great detail in the Youth Task Force report. You can take a look at that to get more detail. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that today, but again, these are all key program criteria that we found in the strongest career pathway models that we could find in our research, either statewide or nationally. They all focus on work-based learning, strong business partnerships, looking at contextualized learning, looking at individual supports in a holistic manner, looking at all the support structures that surround a youth and making sure that we're aligning services to address all of those supports that are needed for success. We want to make sure that these programs support regional WIOA planning. Again, for those of you who are not local workforce areas, all of the regional partners, in a lot of places that's multiple local workforce areas, are developing regional plans to address all of their education and training programs, and they're doing that in a database fashion. They are looking at the key sectors. We want to make sure that any projects that we fund are in support of those regional planning efforts. Don't be afraid to include innovative approaches and strategies. We're looking for innovation that supports these regional plans. We want to inject some new ideas in some new models into what we do. Business intermediaries are definitely an approach to look at. Activities to improve linkages between workforce partners, again, speaking to system alignment. We want to look at business service strategies that speak to employers' bottom line and bring businesses into the workforce investment activities. There was a question. I want to stop right here. How do I connect with the local workforce areas? Is there a list or a website? You can find a way to reach out on the Illinois WorkNet website. However, Betty, you can also reach out directly to me, and my contact information will be at the end of this, my contact information is in these slides. You can reach out directly to me, and I'd be happy to make an introduction as well. As far as other innovative approaches and strategies go, full inclusion models are a really good model that we've seen, especially when we're talking about dealing with youth with disabilities. Illinois is what's called an employment first state. We're spending a lot of time around system alignment to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to serve individuals with disabilities in fully integrated services and in fully integrated workplaces. That's another innovative approach that we suggest when looking at serving individuals with disabilities. Evidence-based programming, and we'll post a link to a good start for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, but you'll see kind of a little primer on it there, but we will also post a good link to talk more about evidence-based programming as well. When it comes to reporting for these grants, we do have some reporting requirements. For those of you who haven't received a grant from the department before, we've got a quarterly programmatic report, which is basically an update on your activities and your outcomes, and a quarterly trial balance report. Those are the two major ones. Also, obviously, there's a case management component to this, and that'll be done through IWDS or Illinois WorkNet. If you get to the stage where you're negotiating a grant, you'll definitely learn more about those if you don't already know about them. As far as MOUs go, non-LWIAs must have an MOU with the local workforce area or WIOA training provider describing the roles and responsibilities for WIOA eligibility determinations, enrollment, case management, and IWIDS reporting. That is a requirement, and that goes for your business partnerships as well. May 2nd is coming up pretty quickly. If you are not able to get an MOU completed by May 2nd, you need to have some sort of written commitment from those entities that are involved in your project, either local workforce entities or your business partners, that says that you are going to develop an MOU that will be executed prior to your receipt of services, meaning prior to the start date of your project, which we're targeting currently for somewhere in the neighborhood of July 1, closer than not. As far as fiscal goes, I'm going to go ahead and try and cover the fiscal pieces. I'm not on the fiscal staff, but I'm pretty familiar with this stuff. I will defer to a representative from the fiscal staff when it comes to questions that we're going to get into in the FAQ towards the end. I got a member of fiscal staff that's going to join us at about 10:30. But I'll go over the basics right now. Allowable costs, you need to make sure that. Yep.
I'm actually here. It's Sheila.
Oh, hey, Sheila. Do you want to go through these slides, or do you want me to kind of cover them right now and then get into the FAQ?
It doesn't matter. Whatever you want to do.
All right. Well, I'll go through them quickly in this portion, and then when we get into the FAQ, you can jump in.
Okay.
So allowable costs, again, this includes costs that are necessary and reasonable and allocable based on the activity or activities contained in the scope of work. You want to make sure that your costs line up with the RFA, basically. When it comes to funding for the activities outlined in this RFA, we will have almost entirely federal funds, and they are subject to federal regulations. We want to make sure that when it comes to your projects that you're using matching and leveraged funds. Again, we talked about the importance of co-investment, and when it comes to those leveraged or any funds that you receive, you want to make sure that it does not exceed what would be incurred by a prudent person under the prevailing circumstances if a decision was made to incur the cost, which means adhering to fair market prices, and that you're following sound business practices. Practically what this means is that you need to be making sure that your costs meet grant goals, that you're adhering to the minimum amount that you need to spend to meet that need, and do you have the capacity to use what you're purchasing, and can you defend the purchases? The thing that we always interject here is if your project showed up in the newspaper, would you be comfortable with the purchases that you've made under your project? Matching funds. I'm going to go over kind of what our brief definitions are of matching and leveraged funds. We're going to talk more about that as we move on. Once we get into the FAQ, we're going to get into more detail on these. But for now, the requirements around matching funds, matching funds are the portion of project costs not paid by the federal funds, and have a number of bullets there that you can kind of use as a guide for how matching funds should fit in. Again, we're going to get into more detail on this in the FAQ, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on it right now. Leveraged funds are all the resources used by the grantee to support grant activity and outcomes, whether those resources meet the standards applied to a match or not. So again, that means both allowable match and other costs that do not rise to the requirements of the regulation, but which support the outcomes of grant activity. As far as reimbursement and performance go, again, WIOA is a reimbursement-based program. These grants will be reimbursement-based. Funding will be provided on a reimbursement basis, and those reimbursements must align with and be prorated on the grantee meeting established performance factors. Let's talk about performance. I pulled out Section 5 of the application to show you exactly what it looks like so you'll know it when you see it. These measures here, any of the measures that you see that we listed in the application, you should make sure that you respond to all that apply to your program. If there are some that do not apply to your program, you're free to let us know that. And you're also free to add additional measures. Again, if we're talking about an innovative model that's outside the box for what we've done historically, there may be additional measures that you want to draw our attention to, and you can feel free to do that below the ones that exist. When it comes to monitoring, this breaks into two pieces. There's a pre-award survey, and basically what a pre-award survey is our way, our fiscal and monitoring staff can get to know your organization if you haven't dealt with us in the past, and we want to make sure that you have the capacity to carry out a grant. Okay? That means sound fiscal practices. That means the staff that's needed to carry out the project that you've proposed. That means adherence to uniform administrative guidance as well. When it comes to monitoring, you need to have an open door policy. We are not going to show up at that door unannounced. I don't want you to think that, but we are going to notify you that we need to monitor these projects in a window of time, and you do need to allow us to do so. That means fiscal monitoring and programmatic monitoring. Again, these are federal funds. They come with a lot of restrictions. We have to adhere to those restrictions. Key elements of the application. Criteria for selection. You need to make sure that you're obviously, a lot of these things are very obvious. You need to fulfill the requirements of the RFA. You need to demonstrate the capacity to do the project that you're proposing to do. Robust employer relationships are key. Again, it's like number 2 on the guiding principles of the task force. Business involvement is key to these projects. If you don't have involvement from business, it's likely that your project will not be evaluated very well. It's just a reality today. If we're going to get youth work experience, if we're going to get youth jobs, we got to have business on board. Coordination with partner agencies needs to be spelled out. Your planned activities and outcomes need to align with the RFA. Again, very obvious. You need to make sure that there's quality and detail your work plan. Your budget needs to be reasonable in relationship to the proposed activities. That speaks to return on investment. Your budget, again, also needs to you need to make sure that all the math checks out. You know, that's an easy indicator for us if we get in and the math's not right. To know that you know, the attention to detail needs to be there. You need to make sure, again, that your budget is clear and concise. The maximum grant awards will be about $500K. That's a soft cap, as I said. I do think that most programs, as they are pilots, most programs are going to come in well under this. It may be that there are some big projects out there that we want to fund, but pilot projects generally, just by nature, inherent to the definition of what a pilot project is a focused experiment to basically measure a project for scalability and sustainability. Let's talk about the budget stuff again. Just as I just mentioned, the application budget section is here. We did update this section in the application and posted that to the website. I do want you to make sure that you check that out because we did have some incorrect proposed match language up at the top of this section. The proposed match was left over from an application that we had for dislocated worker activities, and it was incorrect. We corrected that to make sure that in line with everything that we've told you in the course of all of the information that we've given you on this RFA, that the proposed match column is something that you need to use to describe your matched and leveraged funding. It is not something that only has to be filled out by business. I want to reiterate that. Every application that we see needs to list their proposed match in the line items and describe it in the budget narrative. That is the second half of Section 7. We corrected that on the application and it's posted on the website. We sent out an announcement about it when we did. Double check your math. Make sure that, that your math checks out both internally and against your detailed budget narrative, which is the next part of Section 7. Make sure that you're breaking out all the costs in your line items that describing in the first half of Section 7, and that you are describing when you describe your match. Make sure then that those two budgets that you've got that those numbers that you've got in each your budget narrative and your basic budget section, that those numbers check out between each other. A lot of times, and I can't remember any times that we've gotten in a big stack of applications for a big RFA like this, and we didn't see a few applications whose budget and budget narrative did not reconcile. Just double check that to make sure that it does. It shows a much stronger application. Make sure that you respond to all elements of the RFA for the third or fourth time. Be clear, be concise, and be timely. That's what we ask. Again, applications that are submitted after the deadline, there's a possibility that they could be funded, but if we get great applications right up front, which I expect that we will, we're not even going to look at applications that aren't timely. We can only consider applications that are not timely after we fund all the awards that are timely and meet our criteria. Again, all of the information that you need for this, including the FAQ, is on the Youth 2016 website. This is my contact information. You can feel free to reach out directly to me. If we need to talk on the phone, we can make time to do that. Even if that time has to be after hours, I'm more than willing to talk to folks about their issues with their grant applications and make sure that that we're addressing everything that we need to be. Carrie, the questions that you have are going to be addressed in the fiscal FAQ on the minimum percentage and the blending and braiding of funds. Thank you, Amanda, for posting that. We'll also address your point in the FAQ as well. Questions. You can post to the FAQ on the website again. Now let's talk about some of the FAQ that's come in. Some of this will be reiteration. There will be some new information, though, as well. The FAQ, the overwhelming responses that I've received, I've kind of summarized here into a few slides, and I want to go over some information that people have had issues with. Again, the applications are due May 2nd. I just went over that a couple of times. I won't do so again. We are looking at a proposed project start date of July 1 or somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't think it's going to disallow your grant if it's not exactly July 1. However, just so you know the kind of timeline that we're thinking, we would like to turn these things around for a July 1 start date if possible. Some project start dates, again, may go beyond that. 12 to 18 months is our targeted project length. We are, of course, going to consider projects that may go longer than that. But just so you know, we do have to show career pathway results within the 12 to 18 month time frame, even if your project is really outside the box project that goes 2.5 years, and you're going to track participants for that amount of time for X number of reasons. We are going to have to show within the 12 to 18 month targeted time frame permanent unsubsidized placement and post-secondary tracks for that next career credential, hard, concrete career pathway outcomes. The project scope, we want to make sure that you're looking at a regional or a local scope, not a statewide scope. Okay? We do require agreements with local workforce areas under this. It's not realistic for you to get those done with all the workforce areas in many different regions around key sectors that may be a key sector in this area and may not be on the other side of the state. So we want to make sure that you are focusing these pilot projects, as I said by definition, are focused and are testing for scalability and sustainability. As far as business engagement goes, when it comes to MOUs, you want to make sure that the applications have a statement of intent at a minimum. I know that sometimes it's hard to execute MOUs with businesses. In order to give you more time to get those businesses on board and to get that paperwork complete, we will accept for the review process and only for the review process a written statement of intent. You do have to have an MOU with the business that at a minimum, details their contributions to the program, and you have to have that by receipt of services. A good basis for this, for those of you that are familiar with OJT under WIA or WIOA, there are MOUs required, employer agreements required that could be used as kind of the basis for your MOU with a business under the OJT process. And that's something that you can get into with your local workforce area if you are not a local workforce area. High demand, higher skill, what do we mean by that? You really need to make sure that your sectors, your targeted sectors, are aligning with what's going into the regional planning to make sure that you are dealing with the demand sector. More about the career pathway sectors can be found at IllinoisPathways.com. When it comes to training, Nicole, when it comes to training programs, again, this kind of goes back to where the funding's coming from. If your project is receiving funding from WIOA Title I, which is the overwhelming funding stream in this RFA, then it will have to comply with WIOA Title I regulations. There will also be some extra allowances outside of that, so it's absolutely not a guarantee that they will have to be on the state list of providers. There are also other ways that they can qualify, and that's something that we'll get into on a per project basis. And if you want to talk about a particular training provider, you can feel free to reach out to me. Also, we'll post something on the FAQ site. I'll make sure to post something on the FAQ site that kind of speaks to this in more detail. When it comes to work-based learning, you're talking about on-the-job training, paid work experience, internships, apprenticeships. If it's an internship, though, we want to make sure that the work plan includes the plan for placement in a similar job, so that we're not just talking about kind of a one and done where a kid gets an internship and then doesn't have a job prospect. We want to make sure that there are concrete career pathways outcomes at the end of this process. The WIOA 20% requirement, for those of you, hearkening back to about a half an hour ago when we talked about the 75-25 split for in-school and out-of-school youth, there is a requirement that 20% of WIOA youth funds go to funding work experience. We feel that this is a question that should not matter in this process due to the fact that there is such a focus on career pathways and work experience under this RFA that successful applications are going to meet and exceed that requirement anyway, should inherently exceed that requirement. Comes to credentials. Credentials, do not have to have college credit attached to them. It is encouraged that you're working with your local community colleges, that you're working in college credit programs. If possible, some projects may be, around a bridge program that is working to get a secondary credential. It may be that, your project is industry focused and has a very highly customized training component that does not deal with college credit, and that's fine. Again, though, it is encouraged, and what is required is that credentials are industry recognized, that they're in demand and industry recognized. So in demand goes back to the fact that you're only going to be working with in-demand sectors in your region. Industry recognized speaks to stackability and portability. Stackable and portable credentials allow youth to move through their careers with credentials that they can build on to achieve further levels of their careers and higher paying jobs, and that's important that we're funding projects that speak to that under this RFA. Continuous improvement and sustainability. You'll notice that towards the end of the guiding principles and the program criteria that we did list continuous improvement and sustainability. About this, There are certain questions, continuous improvement is something that's very important because we want to make sure that sustainability is a logical step for these programs, that we're only funding programs that have the intent to be sustainable over a long period of time. We want to make sure that we're building up capacity in the system and we're not just funding one-off career pathway programs here. So there has to be a plan for improving this project cohort over cohort, year over year. That is a continuous improvement plan, and in a continuous improvement plan, you need to be looking at whatever data you're tracking under your program, and you need to make sure that that data speaks to your business partners' bottom lines. Are you a benefit to the business partners that you've brought on board for this program? If you are, again, we feel that that makes sustainability a logical step, makes it in the best interest of the business, and will be a lot easier to secure that public-private funding mix that it's going to take to not only sustain a career pathway program, but also build into your regions a pipeline to the business community. Let's go over a few questions that I've gotten specifically about the application. Section 4B on activities and outcomes. A lot of times that grantees or applicants get confused about this, but the activities that we're asking you to address in the activities and outcomes section, which is section 4B of the grant application, the standard DCEO application, those need to be grantee level activities. We're not asking for a day-by-day, blow-by-blow of what participants are going to be doing activity-wise within the project. We're looking for grantee-level activities that are driving towards your outcomes. So it may deal with participants in that your activity may be the X number of participants in the grant began this curriculum, X number of participants in the grant finished this curriculum. Would be an outcome to that activity. So you want to make sure that your activities lead to outcomes that you're measuring for the grant, and not the outcomes at the participant level where participants are going to show up at 8 a.m., they're going to have a break at 10, and they're going to finish their day at 5 p.m. every day. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about grantee-level activities that speak to outcomes. As far as Section 7A goes, and I believe it's just Section 7 and then Section 7 budget narrative, so there isn't actually an A on there, but it is the first half of the budget section. The proposed match column, this is just to reiterate the change, the proposed match column should reflect the contributions of the applicant and other partners, including businesses, to each line item of the budget. We want to make sure that those matched and leveraged contributions go in that second match column and that they're detailed in the budget narrative. And again, Section 8 with the work plan, I've gotten a lot of questions around page limits and technical proposals, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that the Section 8 work plan questions speak to that technical proposal that needs to be submitted as a separate document. Because of the fact that we do have to do a standard a standard application for all of our RFAs, I want to make sure that that you are understanding that those questions in Section 8 do need to be answered, and that there is a technical proposal that does need to be submitted beside that. Now, that should really just be cut and paste. It's unfortunate that this money, well, I don't think it's unfortunate. It's fortunate that we've got this money to put into programs like this. It's unfortunate that sometimes our application processes, because of the regulations that we're under, have to be a little bit repetitive, but I do think that it shouldn't cause any extra work for you. You should have a technical proposal that contains all the answers to these questions anyway, so use it as a guide, answer the questions in brief, and expand on it in your technical proposal. Again, on MOUs, as we addressed in the body of the PowerPoint today, make sure that you're contacting your local workforce areas, that you're addressing key sectors, addressing planning priorities. We do want to make sure that we're driving partnerships with this. We're going to address the feasibility to sustain successful projects and we want to make sure that for those of you in Cook County, as we know that there's going to be a lot of traffic from Cook County for applications, that you do realize that your first step, because the Cook County Workforce Partnership is going to get a lot of traffic in this, they did ask that we post a link, and that link is your first step in approaching the partnership about your project. Sheila, I'll ask you to kind of jump in here and talk a little bit more about the FAQ that we've gotten on the fiscal side.
Okay, I'll do my best. I guess we've had questions about match and leverage percentage. There's no minimum, but they will be evaluating this based on, the partners that you have involved in your project to kind of come up with a reasonable match or a leverage percentage based on the project that you have defined in your application. For leveraged funds, they can be in-kind or cash contributions. If they are in-kind, keep in mind that they must be necessary, reasonable, and allocable, as with all costs for the grant. They also have to be, specifically based on activities that are contained in your grant scope of work, so has to align with the grant. Leveraged funds, they also can be cash or in-kind, but again, they must be verifiable within your recipient records. So we have to be able to trace those. Next slide, please. I don't know that I can move it.
I got it.
Okay. As leverage funds, we've kind of defined this earlier. It's just all resources used by the grantee to support your grant activities and outcomes. And leverage resources means both allowable match and other costs that do not rise to the requirements of the regulations, but they support the outcomes of the grant activity. For matching funds, this is the portion of the grant costs that are not paid by federal funds, but they must meet those conditions there. They have to support grant activities, they have to be spent on allowable grant activities, verifiable, and you cannot use federal funds to support another federal grant program, and these are federal funds, so the matching funds would have to come from a non-federal source. Of course, they have to be necessary, reasonable, and allowable based on the cost principles. They have to be provided for in your approved budget that you submit with your application and allowable underneath the grant proposal requirements. And they must conform to the uniform guidance provision of cost sharing or matching. That's the specific reference. And I think Matt was going to put up, I sent the link today for the actual 2 CFR 200, which is the entire uniform guidance that is in place now for all federal funds. And I think that's going to be on the site, right, Matt?
Correct.
Okay. Non-federal cash expenditures, those are funds or services that are provided and paid for by a recipient or subrecipient that are paid with non-federal funds. It can be payment for services allowable under the grant or a third-party cash contribution that you spend on allowable costs for the grant. In-kind expenditures are products, space, services that a third party will provide, but they are not paid for by the recipient or the subrecipient of the grant. Allowable costs, this grant will not pay profit, but we will pay for indirect costs for your organization that you incur based on grant activities. Startup funds, the funding is a cost reimbursement basis. We can work with the grantees to provide prompt payment for any costs that you have incurred. If by some chance we have an organization that does require some upfront costs, then please make that clear. And for the uniform guidance, the timing and the amount of the advance payments, you must closely align those. The general rule is about 3 days. That's in the Cash Management Improvement Act. From the receipt of the funds to the disbursement of the funds, it should be within about 3 days for the cash on hand.
And that's it for what we've received either by email on the fiscal side or on the website. I do want to address a couple other things. Brenda and LWIA 20, will these participants be in WIOA performance for the categories we measure? The way that we're looking at it right now, Brenda, and we can talk more about this if you want to, is that applications that are coming from local workforce areas will be included in performance measures. Applications that the local workforce areas, that are coming from outside the local workforce areas, that are pilots, that the local workforce areas are able to analyze for scalability and sustainability. Those programs we can put under LWIA 90, so we can put under statewide. When it comes to Amanda's question, can the MOU be with a provider, or does it have to be with the LWIA? We do want to, our goal here, Amanda, is to make sure that these programs are aligning with the LWIA's regional goals. We want to make sure that we are building partnerships that exist at the LWIA level, and we want to make sure that the sustainability plan that these folks have when they come in with an application is something that the LWIAs are paying attention to, and is something that the LWIAs have input on. Kind of a roundabout way of answering your question. Will grantees be required to spend 20% of the grant funds on work-based learning? Again, we did cover this. 20% of those funds on work-based learning will be a bar that we feel successful applicants will meet and exceed due to the nature of the requirements that we are laying out for successful applications. This is a work-based career pathway RFA, and we expect to see a heavy mix of work-based learning and of business engagement, of work experience, and of training in this. So we do expect that there's going to be inherently a 20% bar or threshold hit there. Pam's question, why can't all participants be under LWIA 90 if we're trying to do something innovative as the grant suggests? We can talk more about that, Pam. It's our thinking right now, though, that that the local workforce areas are, if we've got projects that align with the local workforce areas' regional plans, that those should be something that the local workforce areas are pretty confident going into, that this is going to be something that supports what they want to do and supports, given the amount of funding that we're putting out, supports the performance measures as well. But again, we can talk more about that. I'll put it that way. Can a youth with a high school diploma or GED still be considered out of school if they are less than 24 and not enrolled in college or working? Can a youth with a high school diploma or GED still be considered an out-of-school youth? Out-of-school youth are considered any individual who are not attending any school according to state law and have an additional barrier as listed under WIOA. So the WIOA regulations give us a pretty clear definition of what an out-of-school youth is. I think that it looks like your question, it disappeared on me, but I think that it looks like your question rises to that. Can an RFA application gain access to IWIS and handle eligibility, enrollment, and case management outside of the Workforce Center? I think that would have to be, there would have to be a precedent set for that. I do think that we will have, I I do think that we'll have more to say about that as we go on and as we go into the application review process. That we'll have more to say about how case management will work. Again, we will have, I think, a mix of programs that that are funded by different funding streams. So that's something that we're dealing with as well. And again, Amanda, the answer to your question is complicated because of the support that we have from different places. We can go into more detail on a case-by-case basis if you want to talk about scenarios, and I'm more than happy to kind of try and post our conversation to the website afterwards, so that folks can see that information. But I do have to reiterate that it's not something that I can answer in 20 seconds. So that requires a little bit more conversation. Do we have any other questions right now? Do we have any questions for Sheila on the fiscal side?
I'm sorry. I was kind of involved in something else, so am I supposed to answer something?
No. I was just asking if we had any more questions for you.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Sheila is multitasking for us this morning.
That's like my whole job, multitask.
Anything else that folks want to talk about? We've got about 10 more minutes. Happy to entertain any topics. We can talk about. Anybody have anything that they just kind of want to get off their chest? Going once, going twice. Again, I want to rewind to my contact information so that you can reach out to me. We can again talk about anything about the RFA that you'd like. We can set up time to talk on the phone if you'd prefer that way. There are a couple of questions that I would ask that you answer at the end. We really need to know the organizations that are on the RFA so that we can kind of gauge what types of organizations are thinking about applying. So please answer whether or not you are interested in applying for the WIOA Youth Career Pathway RFA either on your own or as a partner to another applicant. Please type in the name of the organization that you're from as well, so that we can kind of gauge our review process and prepare for that. It's going to be a pretty big lift, I think, with the number of applications we expect to see, to make sure that we can turn these things around, and the information that you give us help that process go more smoothly for your applications and your potential grants as we move on. Outside of that, if there is any other information that I can help you with that we can talk out, please get in contact with me, and I'll be doing another one of these webinars tomorrow morning. It's going to cover much of the same information. We wanted to do 3 this week so that we could make sure that we fit into folks' schedules. All of these questions that we're answering here today will be answered on the FAQ website, and I will incorporate them in tomorrow's webinar. So if you want to pop into the second half of the webinar tomorrow and jump into FAQ, you can feel free. I will spend the first half, however, covering the basic information for folks that have not gotten that information yet, and then we'll get into FAQ in the second half. So feel free to join us for the conversation piece for a half an hour tomorrow if you didn't get all your questions answered today, and I'll try and answer them in a better way tomorrow. Maybe they'll even be the answers that you want to hear. Thanks, everybody, for spending the time with us. Again, reach out to me if you need anything. I'm always available to you. Thanks.